Very good.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, we are seeing unprecedented flooding, particularly in northern New South Wales, and we expect that flooding to get worse. Many would have seen distressing images of survival, and there are many distressing reports, particularly around the Lismore area, of people who are isolated and currently stranded. And I want to make it clear that we are doing everything we can to provide help and support as quickly and as safely as possible. I'd like to thank everybody, particularly in the SES, who are providing all the support they can to help those communities, particularly in northern New South Wales. We have seen to date over 500 flood rescues. We've had 927 requests for assistance over the last 24 hours. There are currently, and this is important, there are 12 evacuation orders currently in place, which are affecting close to 16,000 people in the northeast of our state. Now, if you are in one of those areas and you can evacuate safely, please do so. If you are unsure, please contact the SES on 132 500, and if your life is at risk, please contact 000. There are, in addition to those 12 areas that are facing evacuation orders, there are 6 areas where there is an evacuation warning in place. Commissioner York will speak to these areas. These 6 areas affect around 14,000 people. If you are in one of those areas where there is an evacuation warning in place, please begin planning and preparing for evacuation. And if you can leave, and it is safe to do so, please leave. We note that these areas where there is an evacuation warning in place can become an evacuation order. For those people in communities where it has not flooded before, please do not think that a flood will not occur in your community. We have seen this flooding to be unprecedented, particularly in this area, so please continue to follow the instructions of the SES. Be patient. We are doing everything that we can to provide the help and support for people in these flooded communities. And Commissioner York will provide further information. But as I said, simply because your community has not flooded in the past does not mean that it will not flood over the course of this week. What we are seeing today is unprecedented, and the advice that we have received is that we would expect things to get worse over this period of time. So if you are subject to one of these warnings, please do not be complacent. We know that the situation here in our state is moving quickly, and we are doing everything that we can to provide that help and support for those affected communities in the north. Our message to motorists is do not drive through floodwaters. We say this every time during flooding events. If you drive through floodwaters, you are putting your life and the lives of others at risk. So please, as I said, follow those instructions, follow the advice from the SES, and do not, under any circumstances, drive through those floodwaters. Today, we have stood up the State Emergency Operations Centre here in Homebush, just as we did during the bushfires, for a whole of government response. This will be managed under the leadership of the SES Commissioner, Carleen York, alongside Deputy Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon. This will manage a multi-agency response. We do expect the events of flooding that we are seeing in the northeast to move south over the course of this week. The conditions are expected here in New South Wales to get worse. So whilst at the moment the flooding is located in north and northeast New South Wales, we would expect over the course of this week for that flooding to move further south to the south coast, and also flash flooding in various areas across our state. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for the support that he has provided, in addition to well, in addition to the ADF support, and we already have ADF personnel on the ground, as well as aircraft to assist with logistics and sandbagging. This is of great assistance to us. The aircraft will assist over this period of time with rescues and support our air assets in addition to that. So we acknowledge, though, the conditions at this time are incredibly difficult and challenging, and that has restricted the capacity for air rescues at the moment. But as conditions ease, thus the assistance from the federal government, in addition to the SES support, will provide great assistance to those people. Can I ask those people who are isolated at the moment, please be patient. Please be patient, but be assured we are doing everything we can to help you, to get you through. Can I also ask anyone in those areas to follow those instructions? I've said that from the start. The SES are there, those instructions are there to provide safety and support to you at this difficult time. I want to thank our men and women in the SES and all personnel who are on the front line at the moment, doing everything they can to provide that support. I ask people if they can monitor the SES website, please do so, and ABC Radio as well. If you're unsure, please contact the SES on 132 500. And if it is a life-threatening, if you believe that your life is under threat, please contact 000. Our state has gone through many challenges in the past, and just like the bushfires and the floods over the last couple of years, we will get through this challenge as well. We are doing everything we can from a whole-of-government perspective to get our state through this difficult time. As I've said from the start, we do expect, despite the unprecedented flooding that we are seeing in the north, we do expect conditions to get worse. So once again, please follow those instructions. The SES are there to provide that support, and through the State Emergency Operations Centre today, we will once again have a whole-of-government approach in ensuring that every community right across our state gets through this difficult time. I'm now going to pass to Steph Cook, the Minister for Emergency Services. Then we will hear from Graham Reeder from the Bureau of Meteorology, and then SES Commissioner Carlin York will provide some further details in relation to the situation in the Northern Rivers.
Thank you, Premier. We are presently experiencing very dangerous rainfall and life-threatening flash flooding in northeast New South Wales. My heart goes out to all families, individuals, communities and our volunteers up on the North Coast at the moment. We are seeing the vision of people stranded, people stuck on roofs of homes. My heart goes out to you, and please know that our emergency services are doing everything they can to get to you as quickly as they can. This will continue for several hours. The Wilson River at Lismore is reaching record flood levels. The last record flood along the Wilson at Lismore was set in 1954, and it peaked at 12.17 metres. The river is presently at 14.36 metres and continuing to rise. This is entirely unprecedented for this region. So for those people who have lived here or lived in that wonderful part of the world for many, many years, we need you to please be on alert now more than ever. These conditions are different to anything you will have experienced before. Let me state unequivocally, our priority is about saving lives at this time. All of our emergency services, led by the SES, are focused entirely on people, rescuing people, saving lives. This is a multi-agency response. We have teams from every single emergency response organisation in New South Wales currently responding to this event. They are backing in the SES as the combat agency to the best of their abilities. We are experiencing difficult weather conditions. It is hampering our ability to get aircraft in the air. We have 4 RFS aircraft ready to go. We've been able to get 1 aircraft up intermittently, but conditions are very, very challenging. As the Premier mentioned, the ADF are also supporting us, and I too want to thank the Prime Minister and the Premier. They have been in lockstep around this from the get-go, and I also want to thank my federal counterpart, Bridget McKenzie, for her support in allowing us to have ADF assistance at this time. We have 3 ADF aircraft en route to the region. We also have around 200 Defence personnel, boots on the ground, assisting us with sandbagging and other logistical operations at this time. In relation to the RFS, we have 154 personnel on the ground, 42 brigades. We have 2 additional strike teams ready for deployment. And as I mentioned, we have those 4 aircraft that are very, very keen to get up in the air and start that down-the-wire rescue that we have all seen over time and we know is so effective and works so well. There is no gilding the lily here. This is a natural disaster of unprecedented proportions for this region. I'm once again respectfully asking all residents who are currently the subject of an evacuation warning to prepare to leave at very, very short notice. Please prepare your emergency management kit, whether that be some dry clothes, your medications, your laptops, important documents, batteries, phone chargers, those sort of devices. Please prepare all of that now because we may be calling on you to evacuate under an evacuation order at very, very short notice. The situation is evolving very quickly, it's changing very quickly, and we do not want your life at risk under those circumstances. The final thing I will say is a huge thank you to all of our SES and other emergency services volunteers who are working around the clock. They haven't stopped. And I know that there are so many of them up in that region. I've had some communication with a few of them who are so keen to get out and do more. But the situation on the ground is preventing us from getting to people because of the weather conditions that we are facing. So I just want to say once again, thank you very, very much for your efforts so far. They will of course need to continue over the days and weeks ahead as we head from the emergency response into the clean-up efforts. But right now, the priority is on saving lives. And if you are currently stranded, please be patient. We will get to you as quickly as we can. Thank you.
We're at the beginning of a very significant weather event for New South Wales. Currently, we have unprecedented rainfall that's been occurring in the northeastern parts of New South Wales. That will continue for this afternoon, but then progressively begin to ease, which is good news. However, that low will track through the course of the week down the coast, and in the second half of the week from Wednesday, we are expecting an east coast low to form, and so we will have severe weather warnings, damaging winds, significant seas and swell, and flooding continuing through the southern part of New South Wales, probably from the Hunter region down. The exact timing and location of that east coast low is still to be determined. It is a little difficult to pinpoint that, but the expectation is that it will form during the course of the week, and the weather will get very hairy and very wild later on. Currently, we have multiple major flood warnings out for the Tweed, the Richmond, the Wilsons, the Clarence, Brunswick Rivers and Marshall Creek. The Wilsons River at Lismore is currently higher than the 1954 and 1974 levels. As I said, it is unprecedented. It is increasing, but as I said, some sort of easing should begin during the course of the afternoon. So that means that dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding is still likely to occur, as well as the more generalised riverine flooding. The rain will gradually ease, as I said, from the north later this afternoon, but we still are expecting further rain and thunderstorms through the course of the week, particularly on Thursday and Friday. Along the southern half of the New South Wales coast, riverine flooding is expected. Later in the week, there is a flood watch current for that region. Heavy rain forecast probably from Wednesday as that low moves down the coast, and the system likely to bring damaging winds, very heavy swell, significant rain, and the associated issues that occur with that, like there could be trees susceptible to damage or falling over. Particularly because many of the catchments are already saturated, the heavy rain by itself is significant, but with the antecedent conditions, the rainfall that we've already had, soils are very wet and the environment is vulnerable. So my final message, the Bureau is monitoring and forecasting and producing warnings 24/7, so please stay on top of those, whether it's through the Bureau website or the Bureau application, the Bureau app, and monitor those as needed. Thank you.
Thank you. This, as we've heard today, this is a significant weather event that we're facing. We have been in the planning stage with our other emergency service partners, police, local councils and other stakeholders. We've sent extra resources up to this area in northern New South Wales to respond to those requests for the community, and we've got expert flood rescue technicians up there from a number of agencies, not just SES. So we've seen the unprecedented rise in the rivers, particularly in Lismore, flooding into the Lismore CBD. And as the Minister mentioned, some distressing images that are coming across through the media. Rest assured that SES and our partner agencies are there ready to respond, but because of the weather conditions, it has been difficult to get our air assets, our helicopters up into the air and our boats into the water. I would caution anyone in getting their own boats in the water. We have had occasion where I've seen images of people then getting into distress, which again will call on our resources to go out and help them when they need their assistance, put their lives at risk and put my volunteers and other members' lives at risk as well. We are now getting our air assets, our helicopters up into the air and rescuing a number of people that have been trapped over this period. But it's concerning to note that some of these people who are being rescued are in those areas of evacuation orders. We don't take these lightly. I take a lot of advice from our local SES flood experts who have been through many floods and know what happens when the rainfall is so significant and floods the area. When we give an evacuation order, it is serious and we want people to leave that area because we can't respond, can't promise to respond at a later stage when you do get into difficulty. We give the order so that you can get out across the roads and get away from danger. Sometimes your house doesn't get affected, but the roads will then be cut off and it stops your access from leaving that area and again places your own life in danger, that of your family and that of the rescuers that are called upon to go and assist you. So at the moment, we do have a lot of assets up there. So I thank all our emergency service partners and the police. We've sent a lot of resources into this area, and it's not just Lismore, but the surrounding towns that Graham from the Bureau went through on those river systems. I thank the ADF as well for sending their resources up. They're very willing to help and reached out very quickly to offer any assistance that they could, and they're up in the area as well to assist. We want to make sure that people in these communities are safe. We will continue to give out warnings, evacuation warnings, so please be prepared if you do need to evacuate from your area. Please heed the advice and the directions that the SES and other emergency service partners give and get into a location of safety and make sure that you and your families are safe. It has been mentioned about driving through floodwaters. There are significant road impacts upon roads which will hinder you getting away from some of these flooded areas. And as spoken about, the rivers are still rising and probably will rise until later this afternoon. So what may not be cut off at the moment may still be cut off. So if it's not an emergency to drive and go somewhere, and it's safe to remain at home, please do so, because you could go along a road and find that you cannot get back in the afternoon and again place yourself in danger. The number to call if it is life-threatening, as the Premier mentioned, is 000, and the other assistance line is our SES line 132 500. We have activated the public information call centre as well, because there was a huge impact on our call centre at SES to take those calls. I do ask people to be patient. We've put extra resources on to take those calls, and we will get to those people who need assistance. So please be patient with us. Continue to request the assistance if you need it, and we will get resources out there. And they're certainly becoming very active today, getting the boats out, making sure that we can get to those people in distress. So just be aware of those warnings we put out. There's more information and tips and tricks for getting ready to get your evacuation kit ready, and as the Minister said, what needs to go in that, how to get your animals ready, how to prepare your home in case you do have to leave, and what you have to take with you. So be aware and keep up to date with all those warnings, because we are there to make sure that the community is safe and remains safe through this event. As it eases in the north part of the state, we will be moving resources down into lower parts of New South Wales. We've also called on flood rescue experts from Victoria and South Australia to come in and assist us as we need to move down into the southern part of the state. So we're already commenced planning on the south coast with our emergency service partners to make sure that those communities are safe as the weather moves down the coast.
Questions?
The forecast was wrong. I mean, is there a reason that we weren't as prepared for this? Perhaps we could get from the bombs. Why weren't we prepared for the scale of what we've seen over the past few days?
Well, we certainly had a major flood warning issued for the area as early as Saturday. We were talking about the Queensland situation and the significant unprecedented falls there, expected to come into northern New South Wales, and that's what occurred. It is fair to say, though, the system really was quite slow moving. It probably moved a little slower than expected, and that just meant that some of the peak falls were a little higher than expected. But in general, I think the pattern was quite well predicted.
So why don't you think people evacuated as quickly as maybe they should have in hindsight?
That's probably not a question for me to answer.
Is it maybe for the Commissioner? Yeah.
I'll take that one. I think this is unprecedented, and it's, as mentioned before, it's larger than the records back to 1954. And people who have lived there, particularly in this area, have lived through a number of floods before. Certainly back February, March last year, 2017, there's been a number of floods up here, and it's the nature of the geography of the area. And they make assumptions that they think that it'll be just the same as last time, and it may have lapped around their fence posts, but it didn't come to their home. This is significantly different to what they've been through before, and there'd be very few people that probably remember the 1954 floods. They then make decisions that perhaps in hindsight they will say they might have made a different decision. So that's why I ask them to please listen to our warnings, follow our orders. Particularly we have council barriers on roads. People decide then to risk it and drive around. They have these days larger vehicles, four-wheel drives, and they think because it's a big car they can get through the floodwaters, and that's just an error that they will regret. And it's an error that we hope is not life-threatening. So if the roads are closed, find another route, or don't go out at all and remain, if it's safe, remain at home. Or if you need to evacuate or you want to get one step ahead, go to friends, family, or the evacuation centres that are set up, because they're there to help you.
Commissioner, in the Lismore region, we've heard of reports of hundreds of people still needing to be rescued, but only 2 SES boats in that region. Can you confirm that, and is that enough help for a town the size of Lismore?
There are many more than 2 boats in that area. Lismore itself has at least 7 boats, and we've sent more boats from surrounding areas up there to help. The difficulty being, it has been night, sending some of the boats out when the rivers are quite raging, strong, swift. Debris in it can be very, very dangerous for our rescuers, and we don't want to put our volunteer lives at risk by sending them out. So as the dawn came, and as we can get the helicopters up, we've been with RFS, we've been across and had a look at a number of areas, and those rescues have commenced. And we will commence, or we have commenced the boats in those areas where it is safe to go out to rescue those people. So I don't know where 2 boats came from, but there are many SES boats up there. Marine rescuers waiting if we need them, because they're not swift floodwater rescue operators, but they're there to assist for other tasks. We've got fire and rescue, flood rescue operators up there. And as I said, we're going to get South Australia and Victoria up as well.
Commissioner, do you have a sense of how many people might still be trapped in their homes? And are you also anticipating the death toll to rise?
Well, I hope the death toll doesn't rise, but I think what we've seen in Queensland, it can be quite devastating. Again, people make decisions based on their past knowledge, which they may regret later in hindsight. At any time, the jobs are changing in numbers, but there are around 200 other flood rescues that we need to attend to. And as waters change, you know, those numbers may go up, but we have the personnel out there, we have the boats out there, we've now got the helicopters and ADF to go out and help the community in their hour of need.
Premier? Should the messaging have been stronger earlier on, at least over the weekend, that you know, that this is what we were potentially looking at, and that people indeed shouldn't rely on their past knowledge, that they needed to actually get out this stuff?
We've made it very clear yesterday and very clear today, and I think as the Commissioner has pointed out, this is an unprecedented event. It is worse than expected, and ultimately we are providing very clear messages, very clear instructions from the SES in relation to those evacuation orders and evacuation warnings. And as the Commissioner has clearly pointed out, what we do see in these circumstances is that people reflect on their past experience. But past experience doesn't mean much in an unprecedented event. So those orders are not there for the sake of it. They're there to protect you and your family and to keep you safe. So if those orders are in place, if there's an evacuation warning in place, please be prepared and please be ready to evacuate on very short notice. This has happened very quickly over this period of time. The SES are doing everything they can to get out. As we've seen hundreds of rescues over the course of this period of time, but please follow the instructions, because what we do see, unfortunately, in these flood events is that much tragedy occurs when those instructions are not followed, particularly about driving through floodwaters. It occurs every single time we have a flood across our state. Please don't drive through those floodwaters, and if those evacuation orders are in place, please leave. And I think, as the Commissioner has said, the challenge that we're having is that people's past experience is leading them to make a decision in relation to stay. Those warnings are there to provide you with information, and if you are able to leave, even if that evacuation warning is in place, please do so.
Premier, what do you make of the scenes of seeing people stuck on roofs? Elderly people being pulled into boats?
Well, it's incredibly distressing. I think the images that we're seeing up north are concerning, distressing, and you know, our hearts go out to each of those people who are affected by this. What I can say is that we are doing everything that we can to provide that support and to get to you as quickly as possible. As the Commissioner has said, the conditions still remain incredibly difficult, and there are boats available. We do have the support of the ADF on the ground, and we will get to you as quickly as we can. It is a coordinated effort right across government to provide the support that's necessary and to ensure that we are able to safely rescue people right across that Northern Rivers region. But obviously what we've seen today in those images are incredibly distressing, and we are doing everything that we can from a state government perspective to provide that support and get you out safely.
Premier, you said the situation is going to get much worse. What exactly does that look like?
Well, it doesn't look like at this stage, as we've said, that the rivers have peaked and the flooding has peaked. We also expect, as we've pointed out here early today, that we would expect these weather conditions to move further south over the course of the week, particularly towards the back end of the week. And in addition to that, we also expect flash flooding in various areas across our state. So this is a very difficult time. And so and the warnings we're providing today and the instruction from the SES today is not just limited to the north, because we do expect this to go further south and particularly into the south coast. So the strong instruction today and our clear message today is that when these warnings are in place, as this event moves through our state, please follow those instructions. Those instructions are not there for the sake of it. They're there to protect you, your friends and your family. So please follow the advice from the SES. And as the Commissioner has said, and as the Minister has pointed out, we'd like to thank those SES personnel who are on the ground providing that support, putting their lives at risk. But please don't let them take unnecessary risks because those instructions are not being followed.
People in those areas further down, even as far as the South Coast, what should they be doing now if you're talking about the back end of this week? Should they be making plans at this stage to prepare for that, and what does that look like?
Yeah, thank you, Premier. What they should be doing at the moment is making sure their houses are as safe as possible. So that's we have a lot of calls when it's not, we give priority to life-threatening situations, but we also have a lot of calls for storm damage and water inundation into houses and businesses. Clean out your gutters, tie down loose equipment, all the normal messages that we give to the community when there's storm activity. There's more information on our SES website. But also look at, as the Minister said, what you should take if you need to go quickly. So there's a couple of things, and the Minister went through it with medication, important documents, identification documents that you may need. But also think about the animals. So we have a lot of rural properties, so farmers should be thinking about their stock, where they can put them up onto higher ground, because at times there will be requests for assistance for the SES to go out and save those animals that get into distress. And if you have domestic animals and you are away from your home, make sure you have someone that you know that you can contact to go and help those animals, that they know where to get a key, that they can get access if you're away from home. And if it's your animals and you're at home, then make sure that there's a bag of essentials that you need to take for your animals as well. Keep up to date with all the information that both the Bureau and SES are putting out to give an update on the situation as this weather event moves south, and make sure that you're ready and knowledgeable. Sometimes, and we've had a little bit of problems with communications, we always say have a battery operated radio, which is going a bit back to the past, but something that will give you information if communication breaks down, so that you know what the situation is in your particular area. Some of these areas also, it's saturated all the way across New South Wales. We've had a very, very wet summer and landslides, road blockages and things. So live traffic can give some really good information in relation to those roads that are cut and where people can access or exit different areas safely. So there's a lot of information out there that the agencies provide to the community, and they should be up to date with this weather movement as it goes south.
And do you think you have enough personnel reserved for the South Coast when it's that way?
Yes, we have moved extra members up into the Northern Rivers District, but also we have retained our volunteers and other emergency service partner members down on the South Coast to make sure that they are in the stages of planning and also getting messaging out and communication out to the community to prepare them for this event as it comes through. I think the messages that we get from Queensland and Northern Rivers really drives the message home that people need to be prepared and follow our directions as we give them for their different communities. We also have retained some staff and some members and volunteers out in the western area, because that area is still flooding from approximately 3 or 4 months of flooding down the rivers out west, and we anticipate the weather up in Queensland will cause further flooding as it comes down those rivers.
And will the flooding in the South Coast be worse than what we're seeing here, or on a similar level?
We're unable to say at this stage, because as each day goes past, so tomorrow will be a bit clearer as the Bureau gives us their forecast. We have the Bureau embedded into our operations centre, so we are getting the best up-to-date advice from the Bureau of Meteorology as they make their conclusions in relation to the movement of weather. The issues with these types of East Coast lows is it just depends where it goes, how close to the coast and what path it travels. And then the unknown is where it will actually drop the heaviest rainfall. So we make sure we send the messages out evenly across all communities to be prepared.
And the Premier said that there could be flash flooding across the state in various areas. Can we expect something like that in urban areas, including Sydney?
We're anticipating that at this stage, based on the advice from the Bureau, that they won't get as heavy a storms as we've had up north. but they will get heavy rainfall, which will lead to flash flooding. And that is affected by the amount of saturation that's in the land at the moment, that there is nowhere for the water to run. As it falls onto the ground, it will cause flash flooding, and that's a very dangerous situation for any motorists or people in those communities. So we're preparing also in the metropolitan area, but at this stage we don't think it will be the same as in Northern Rivers, but every day we are assessing that and working with the Bureau about their forecasts.
Commissioner, I know you said that you don't want people going out on their own boats. You want SES to do the job. How does it make you feel though? So can you understand why communities want to rally around their neighbours, around their loved ones, to get out and try and support each other?
Well, yes, I absolutely understand it, but the SES is a community-based agency as well, so I understand the dedication that both our volunteers and community members have for each other in the community. But I must caution that if my expert flood rescue technicians find the waters dangerous and we are holding them back so that we don't put their lives in danger, then community members should take heed. But I can understand why they are trying to help those other community members.
Premier, what sort of financial support is your government looking at providing, and how quickly is that going to be able to start rolling out into people's hands?
Well, I've already had discussions with the Prime Minister in relation to disaster declarations, and that process is currently in place and is underway. Just like we have in the past, we will do whatever it takes once these floods have subsided to get these local communities back on their feet as quickly as possible. We've done that in the floods of the past, and we'll do it as we move through this period as well. I want to thank the Prime Minister for the numerous discussions we've had over the course of the day. He has indicated whatever support we need from the Commonwealth, they will provide, and that's just not in operational and logistics support, it's also in financial support as we move through. So those declarations are in place. In addition to that, Shane Fitzsimmons from Resilience New South Wales is here as well. That is a focus we are already focusing on right now, what comes next, and the clean up and help communities get back on their feet. We've done that over the course of the floods in the past, and having Resilience New South Wales in there is already working away, not just across the New South Wales government and all of our agencies, but also in conjunction with the Emergency Management Centre at the Commonwealth Government level.
So I know Jeff Frydenberg announced about $1,000 for people that will be available. Is your government doing something separately though? Will it be individual grants that people can apply for, and how much is that likely to be?
Well, we'll work through that. As I've said, that we're not going to put a dollar figure on providing support. This is about getting our communities back on their feet as quickly as possible, and whatever financial assistance we can provide, we will. We've done that, as I've said, in every flood in the past, where there are always been learnings through that process, which Resilience pick up on. But ultimately, our focus here from a government perspective is our people and getting every single one of our people through it. Obviously, in the short term, right now, our focus today is to ensure people's safety in those flooded communities. That is our focus. The safety of everyone in the Northern Rivers. And then obviously over time that will shift to making sure those communities get back on their feet as quickly as possible, and we will put whatever we need to and work in conjunction with the Commonwealth Government to provide that support to get every single person through this.
Premier, ICAC has made some recommendations in relation to its findings into Chinese donations. So that includes fines for less severe breaches of the ban on cash donations and cracking down on payments made to parties if they don't meet acceptable standards of governance and internal controls.
Yeah.
Will your government accept those reforms and change the law?
Well, obviously over the course of the day I've been focused on the floods, but I have been briefed very briefly in relation to the ICAC report and the recommendations. We will take them on board, consider them and make a decision. But I think today just demonstrates once again the importance that the ICAC plays in preventing and uncovering corruption in our state. And I can assure you, Angura, from my position as Premier, there is no place for corruption in New South Wales, and whatever we can do to stamp it out, we will. And any of those recommendations to the government provide guidance to us in terms of actions that we can take to ensure the events of the past, here in circumstances of the Labor Party, do not occur again. And I'll obviously, as Premier, review those recommendations, and then the Cabinet will consider it. But ultimately, we want to be in a position where our state has a zero tolerance to corruption.
There have also been allegations around misuse of funds for COVID emergency funds.
Yeah.
What do you say to those allegations?
Well, we will work through that. I mean, we have put $46 billion over 2 years to get our people through the COVID pandemic, and whatever I can say as the former treasurer, when we were going through this from a health perspective, I said to the health minister, whatever support you need, you will have. Every single one of those dollars needs to go to helping people get through. That's why we took the approach we did. And my expectation is that every one of those dollars supports our people. And if that has not occurred, then we will take action. If that has not occurred, we will take action. And there's always a balance. In fact, I note we've been criticised for example, some of the investments in PPE. I can assure you what we did at the start of the pandemic, if you took me back to that time and those discussions, I would do everything the same. I'll do everything again, because ultimately at that point, we did not know what we were facing into. We've also gone recently and invested substantially in the procurement of rapid antigen tests. Perhaps we've procured too many, but ultimately at that point in time, it's better to procure more than less and have that support available to our people. But in relation to misallocation of funds, well, I take that very seriously. And any review, I would expect Treasury to conduct reviews in relation to every single dollar that we have invested or enabled agencies to invest to help get our people through this pandemic. And my expectation is that every member of the public service has an obligation to ensure that every dollar goes towards supporting our people.
Over the weekend, documents revealed that when you were treasurer, you and your government agreed to give $5 million and got $5 million to an aged care centre in Port Macquarie, and that was against the advice of Treasury. Shortly around the time that Leslie Williams moved over from that. Did you arrange that grant for Leslie Williams to woo her over to the Liberal Party?
Certainly not. I mean, I don't have any. I did read that report and I haven't followed it up, but I don't have a recollection of that. And obviously that's, when you're treasurer and you've got a $90 billion budget, you're making a number of decisions over the course of the year or making recommendations to Expenditure Review Committee. I did notice in that report that was a matter for the Expenditure Review Committee. I don't recall the individual situation, but I'm happy to look at it. And once again, I've certainly said, but in terms of the assertion of Leslie Williams and the decision to leave, I can assure you that I never had any conversation, or that was never any focus of mine at any point in time. In relation to Treasury, well, I can tell you as somebody who was Treasurer for 5 years, I disagree with Treasury on a number of decisions over that period of time. I've always, in my previous role, I always asked Treasury to not preempt my decision, to provide me with frank and fearless advice that I would then have my own recommendation that I would go to Expenditure Review Committee on. So simply because the public service advises one thing and the government makes a different decision is not in of itself an issue. In fact, that's why elected officials are there to make those decisions, and I always certainly made it very clear to the Treasury Secretary, I don't want you to think or preempt what my decision will be. I want you to provide frank advice on every single submission that comes in, and I'd expect the same of the current Treasurer and all ministers as well, to not influence public service advice. It needs to be completely independent.
Day one of most people returning to the CBD. I know it's still early days, but can you get a rough read on being successful?
Well, I think this morning was successful. From just coming into town this morning, there seems to be a lot more people out and about. Confidence is returning. Confidence is returning as it returned following the Alpha and the Delta outbreaks. And this is incredibly important for local businesses. I think the fact that face masks are no longer mandatory in the office is building that confidence, and people actually want to come back to the office. We held that CBD summit recently, and I would say, just like the previous two, there are many ideas that the government's currently working on to breathe life back into the city. And when the cities go well, the state goes well. So I think it's very pleasing to see that many people are coming back to town. I'm certainly working with the public service here in our state to work on our return to work plans, which I think will lead by example. And I know the private sector as well is following suit, but it's incredibly pleasing to see. It's also pleasing to see the trains were operating today at capacity, or the COVID-safe capacity at 75%. That's pleasing. It's great to see things getting back to normal, getting back to the life that we love. And that is occurring because of the efforts that people have made across our state. It's been a really difficult summer. It's been a difficult 2 years in New South Wales. But I look around the world, and you look at Australia, and you look at our COVID response on the factors that matter, our healthcare, our economy, people in jobs, businesses open. I think we have a lot to be proud of as a state, and the efforts that people have made to get vaccinated and to go and get booster shots. And I know COVID questions are less now as we move through the next set of issues. But I'd make this point, please go out and get the booster shot if you're eligible. That has been key, and there's no doubt on that. If you look at every other country around the world, what separates Australia from the rest has been that vaccination rate, which has put downward pressure on our hospitalisations and ICU presentations. But to see many people coming back into town quicker than I expected, actually, and that's incredibly pleasing. That's going to support as well. I say to people coming back to town as well, please go and support those small businesses. Think about the small convenience store around the corner in the city that hasn't had many people come through for 2 years. I know there's one just down on Macquarie Street, that would rely just close down towards Circular Quay. I mean, they would rely on tourists. He's still there. He's still there operating. And so if you're coming back to town as well, please look after those areas that have been doing it tough, those hospitality areas, those small little cafes and restaurants and bars. It's been a difficult time for our city. We are a resilient state. We're a resilient people. We're here today talking about floods. We've come through bushfires. We will get through this challenge just as we've got through the pandemic.
I mean, just a final question, just in terms of the cost, no doubt it's going to keep growing.
On which one?
The cost of the damage and the cleanup that we're looking at, the floods.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of costs to deal with, no doubt. In terms of the flood damage, though, what are you anticipating this is going to be? How many homes damaged and the sort of...
I think that's, Lucy, I think that's too early to tell. But what I do know is that we will be there to get every single person back on their feet after these floods have passed. And whether that's in the north or the south, we will get through this. We saw just, I think it was 12 months ago. 12 months ago, we've had flooding in our state, and we have done everything that we can to get those communities back on their feet. Our focus right now, 2 points I make, our focus right now is keeping people safe, conducting the rescues that are needed to be required. As the Commissioner has said, as the Minister has said, if you are isolated, we will get to you as quickly as possible. We will do whatever we can whilst maintaining the safety of our SES personnel to get people to safe ground as quickly as possible. As the early question, there are many distressing scenes that many people are facing, particularly in the north. We will get everyone through this. It's going to be a tough time, but we will get through it. And once we are through it, we will get people back on their feet as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Everybody.